So it will be a pretty exciting morning. So I'm happy for everybody who made it so far and are here this morning. So as I said, we're very, very happy to have Dan Nechita today with us. He unfortunately won't be able to be here on stage because he has a lot of other commitments in Brussels. But he agreed to come and talk to you as we already talked about, and part of a big pillar and part of this symposium has been the EU AI Act that came into effect in August, and Dan was one of the incremental people that worked on this. So he's the former head of cabinet of Dragos Tudorashke and at the European Parliament, and he basically, before the EU AI Act came into effect, he was the one working on this for a long, long time. So he has spent most of basically the mandate geeking out on the details of the EU AI Act and promoting closer transatlantic ties. He was the state councillor for the Romanian Prime Minister with a mandate on e-governance and cybersecurity. He worked at the World Security Institute, the Global Zero Nuclear Disarmament Initiative, at the Brookings Institution Center for Executive Education, and as a graduate teaching assistant at the George Washington University. And today, his talk would be about the future of AI governance and making it all work. Just want to make sure that we can see him. There you are. Hello.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Ready to go whenever you are.
Yes, you are. Yes, you're on stage. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
I don't know if you can see anyone, right? You can't see the people, unfortunately.
I see the back of a few people.
Okay, cool.
Hi,
All right, guy. All right, awesome. Okay, well, the stage is yours, guys. Please, a round of applause for Dan.
All right, awesome. Well, lovely to be with everybody. Thank you, Elena, for having me, and thanks everybody who braved the early morning. I'm hoping that you have a coffee in your hands. I will be, I saw that you have a lot of interesting discussions. I wish I were there with you to partake in some of these discussions. So maybe the way I thought I'd structure this little talk would be to add value by giving you a little bit of a top level overview of okay, not just the AI Act, you probably know it or you've read summaries about it, but more on the why behind it on one hand, and then on the other hand, the things that still need to happen for EU AI governance, and maybe some thoughts on how the international governance stage is evolving. So maybe I'll start a little bit with the past. So I've been working in the European Parliament for the last 5.5 years. We ended our mandate just a few months ago. And from the beginning of the mandate, we started working on artificial intelligence. So we worked on shaping our group's proposal on artificial intelligence, then establishing and leading a special committee on artificial intelligence in the Parliament while the Commission was formulating its position on the AI Act. And then, of course, Dragos was the rapporteur for the AI Act, which meant that we led the negotiations, him at the political level, I led the technical level, and that was together with the co-rapporteur and his team. So why did Europe regulate? And the first question that we always get is, what about innovation? Innovation versus regulation. So maybe I'll start with that and explain a little bit, start with an anecdote. Just yesterday, I was on a call and somebody was complaining saying, oh, AI regulation is so fragmented. On one hand, you have Colorado. On the other hand, you have EU. And on the other hand, in Qatar, it's a totally different approach. And I said, hold on 1 second. Let's backtrack a little bit on that and see. So you have one state within the United States, which is one country. Then you have another country. And then in a single block, you have 27 countries, which make up, one of the largest economies in the world. So that to me shows that the AI Act has already fulfilled its first purpose, which is to provide, a single set of rules all across the European Union, and to basically work to consolidate the single market. There are, I was just reading through an article. There are 690 some initiatives, bills in different legislatures in the United States on artificial intelligence. Now, of course, most of them won't pass, but it does come to show that one of the first, goals of the AI Act has been achieved, which is to consolidate the single market and to consolidate and make uniform the rules that we have in the European Union. Then going back to the innovation versus regulation question. So it is true that in general, regulation is not meant to do innovation. Innovation is done differently. It's done by investing, it's done by stimulating investments, it's done by opening up procurement and so on. So to begin with, the dilemma is not, the dichotomy is not really well placed. But even if we think in terms of innovation, right, one of the main things behind artificial intelligence is the lack of trust. A lot of the general population, not necessarily, the ones who are in the AI field, but the general population is very apprehensive about artificial intelligence. So what the AI Act does is it mandates basically those who build AI to build AI that is safer. Now, when you have safer AI, then you can increase the trust that you have in the technology. Once the trust increases, then you have more adoption of that technology in society. Once you have more adoption, then the economic sectors that depend on AI or that are using AI are growing. So the market for AI is growing, and therefore the market creates a space for innovation. So it's not a direct link. Okay, your regulation now is stifling innovation. It's not really like that. It's not A leads to B. It's more safety leads to trust. Trust leads to adoption. Adoption leads to growth. Growth leads to innovation. So it's a longer causal chain, but I think it's important to mention. Then, of course, also on the more critical side, we hear a lot on Europe is falling behind. Europe is falling behind. And that is, unfortunately true. We need to do more to work to stimulate our industries, to stimulate our champions, to stimulate startups and SMEs and so on. But Europe does have a very powerful tool at its disposal to work and to participate on the global stage, which is its basically ability to set rules and norms that then get propagated in the international system. So the AI Act also does that. It's the famous Brussels effect, wherein we put into the development of technology, not just in Europe, but all across the world, some of the things that are important to us, which is the very, very fundamental values that support the European Union: democracy, rule of law, protecting fundamental rights. And that contributes then to when all across the world we have legislative initiatives that are inspired by the AI Act, it contributes to diffuse those values, which I think are values healthy for not just for the functioning of societies, but then ultimately even for economic growth. So that, with that part, I just wanted to give a little bit of more than just, okay, the AI Act is about protecting health, safety, and fundamental rights. It is about that, but it is also about different other effects that I'm happy to see that we are achieving with the regulation. Now, maybe some of you are not familiar with the specifics of the rules, so maybe it's worth spending 2 minutes on just giving a top level presentation of the rules. So first of all, the AI Act doesn't apply across the board. It is a risk-based regulation. What that means is the higher the risk of an AI system causing harm to health, safety, or fundamental rights, the more obligation that system has. And it's basically a tiered approach to the obligation. So first of all, you have unacceptable risks. The unacceptable risks are those risks that we really consider that we don't want to take in Europe. And those deal with the way our societies function, right? So mass surveillance, social scoring, like it's done in authoritarian regimes that would then determine the fate of the citizens. And things like these are prohibited. But these are very limited, and these are things that nobody, living in a democratic society would want to see anyway. Then the bulk of the regulation addresses those systems, those AI systems, that are deemed to be uh, posing or potentially posing high risks to health, safety, and fundamental rights. And these are the systems that are used to make decisions in areas that impact basically the fundamental rights of people. So for example, if an AI system decides on whether or not you should get medical assistance, if an AI system decides whether or not you should get asylum, on if an AI system decides on things related to justice and so on. So it's basically a very discrete list, which was estimated at the time that of the proposal by the Commission to be at about 15% of the AI systems out there, which have those obligations to make those systems more safe and to make them, unbiased, for example, so that it doesn't discriminate against women or against the disabled or against, different categories, socioeconomical categories. That is basically the AI Act. Most of it applies to these AI systems. Then you have systems that propose a limited risk, like chatbots that could be deceiving or deep fakes that could be, used in disinformation. And for those, basically the obligations are purely on transparency. Just inform those who are exposed to these systems that they're dealing with an AI, right? That they're not talking to their psychiatrist, that they're not seeing a real image, that image was created with AI. It's just information and transparency on that. And then you have the bulk of AI, which is really not regulated. If you're doing an industrial AI, if it's an AI in agriculture, AI in different domains that don't have a risk to impact health, safety, or fundamental rights, those have absolutely no regulation. And there is a lot of AI that has nothing to do with the AI Act. Then, to fully close the circle, we also have in the AI Act a set of rules for the very, very powerful AI models, which then can be used downstream in thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of applications. The ones of the like of, the ones that the very, very big companies produce out there, and you all know them. I don't want to endorse one or another. So but it's that list of several very powerful models, and they have rules to work with the Commission, the European Commission, to make sure that the systemic risks that they might cause are kept under check. That is, if there is an incident happening, they need to report that incident. They need to test their models before they put them on the market, and so on. So very commonsensical obligations, especially when we think that these might be embedded into millions of other businesses, and then we'll have troubles if the model malfunctions. So of course it's a very hefty regulation. So there's a very top level overview of it, but in principle that's it, in very broad lines. Now, of course, all of this, and I'm moving into a little bit the area of governance, all of this has to be supervised and enforced, and not only in the European Union, but also making sure that all of this works across the world and in different interactions, and ideally, all of these converging into a set of rules that would facilitate then, even companies to play in different markets, to access different markets, and it would really help everybody enforce some of these rules at the international level. I'll talk a little bit about the AI office and some of the things that the European Union is doing. Um, because the AI office is something that we've created within the AI Act as an institution to supervise those very big and powerful models. So in parallel, and going a little bit into international cooperation, we have, although not necessarily upfront and formally, but we have informally discussed with many of our allies and partners and work to get to a common lexicon or a common understanding of what it is that we're trying to do when establishing these institutions. So the US has an AI Safety Institute. The UK has an AI Safety Institute. There is one in Japan, in Singapore, and there's many others popping up around the world. And in a sense, they're all structures that will have to interact with the European Union AI office. So the AI office has the task of working with the very powerful model providers to make sure that their models are safe to use in the European Union. And by design, because of course the technology moves really, really fast, by design, we didn't want to put into the rules very, very hard and strict rules, but rather to have these obligations for them to work together so that they keep up with technological developments, and they do, they monitor the rules and their implementation continuously and together. Right now, after the AI Act was adopted, and I'm getting into the present and then the future, the AI office has started working. It is nested within the European Commission, and it is starting to consult stakeholders on what is called a code of practice, which code of practice will inform how exactly the rules in the AI Act will apply. Of course, that code of practice cannot go outside the letter of the law, so it's still the obligations in the AI Act that will apply, but it is a means to facilitate compliance and to facilitate the enforcement of these rules. Some of the challenges ahead, because that's how I introduced this part, are the fact that talent on artificial intelligence, and especially very technical talent, is hard to attract. And it's a challenge all of the institutions all around the world have, because of course, if you come from a technical background, you're a lot more likely to go and get paid gazillions in a big tech company than to go into public service and to do the same thing, but for a fraction of the money. But the good news is there is a lot of very enthusiastic people who believe that they should play a role in this part in supervising the development, especially at the frontier. So there are a lot of people who have applied and who have joined this AI office in the European Union. Some of the challenges here will be to make sure that we retain them, to make sure that we keep them engaged and satisfied, and give them relevant work to do, not just for a few months, but in the years to come. Then, uh, outside the AI office, all is not yet done because the AI Act relies on a number of secondary legislation that clarify in detail some of the provisions in the AI Act. And with a change of political leadership at the whole European level, right? With European Parliament elections, with the new Commission, with new priorities, which maybe I'll spend a minute later on talking about those priorities too. With new political priorities, um, there is a space of a few months when, especially very powerful companies are advocating to dilute some of these rules. Some of them have, common sense and good points, saying that okay, maybe here you need to take this into account, or you need to take this into account. Some of them are going to extremes and saying, and even putting out, campaigns showing citizens how discontent they are, that, oh look, I turned myself into a dolphin with this application, but it's not coming to Europe because of the rules. Uh, I think the latter will not be successful, because I think the rules are fairly clear. Um, and then, of course, there is some room for improvement that I'm sure the Commission will take into account. So you have this period of a few months of a little bit of back and forth until all of the details of the rules are being hashed out. Then the next point that's coming up in the future, and I think I'm moving slowly from, okay, the past, the establishment of the structure, and then what is coming up next. The next point in the future, I think, will be to work to not necessarily promote all of the rules that we have in the EU, because these are specific to the EU, but to work with our partners and with third countries to argue for regulatory interoperability. That is, to make sure that the rules that they build for artificial intelligence, no matter where they are compatible and on work together with the rules in the European Union. We've done that very well with the OECD. So we've worked a lot, and I can say that now that the negotiations are over, we've worked a lot and very constructively with the OECD on the definition of artificial intelligence. We have started off on a, I would say, wrong track here in the European Union. And then together with the OECD, we work to converge on a single accepted definition of AI. And, I'm very happy to say that now they look exactly the same. The definition accepted by the OECD and the one in the European Union. So that kind of interoperability, that kind of work together with our partners, I think it's very, very important in the years to come. Part of that work is also the work on standards. Standards seem very technical and very boring, and if you're not into standards, it sounds like something you don't want to do. It's like a math problem. But in reality, all of the rules in the Artificial Intelligence Act depend on the elaboration of standards. Once the standards are out there, if a company follows those standards, then it is presumed to be compliant with the Artificial Intelligence Act. So in essence, these standards show how exactly you're going to implement all of the requirements in the AI Act. And the work on standards is ongoing, and I think it is a very, very important place for the years to come. In parallel, um, the safety institutes, those institutes that focus on AI safety, and especially at the frontier that we have, both within the AI office in a sense, both both in within the AI office and in other countries. So, for example, in the US, in the UK, and in other parts, are now starting to realize that they need to sort of federate together so that they are more effective in understanding what it is exactly that they need to be on the lookout for. So in the UK, the accent in the beginning was on national security and on frontier risks. In the EU, it was more about it's about transparency and on systemic risks, whether they're at the frontier or just risks such as disinformation, which could also be systemic. In the US, there's a comparative advantage that the US is known to work closer with industry, so they get a lot more insight on exactly where the technology is going. So now I think another important step here in the international arena is for all of these safety institutes to work together and to start building this network of safety institutes. And my feeling is that although the AI Act establishes a number of structures at the European level that are meant to help enforce it, my feeling is that member states will also be developing individually those safety institutes just to also have that competence at the national level. Then going back to the EU and what needs to happen or what would be good to happen, especially now that we're shifting our priorities, I think we are at a point where we have plenty of digital regulation. I think that everything that we've done had a purpose and it makes sense. So I don't necessarily agree with all over regulations all across Europe and so on. However, I think indeed, just like in the Draghi report and just like in calls from that we've seen from other member states, that now we're at a point in time where we have this political transition. We have a new mandate in the European Commission, in the European Parliament. I think that we're at a point in time where we need to take a little step back and start figuring out how they all work. How does the AI Act work together with the DMA, with the DSA, with the Data Governance Act, with the Data Act, with all of these new regulations that are slowly coming into effect in the next mandate, and to make sure that they're effective, right? Because if the result of these regulations is just that you have a 5 pound or a 10 kilogram um, stack of papers that a company has filled, but the AI is still unsafe, then we failed. We need to make sure that they actually are effective and they work seamlessly together. So in the next mandate, also aligning with what I think the Commission and the Council and the Parliament are looking forward to, I think we're going to see a lot more focus on first making it all work, and two, and importantly, increasing the diffusion of technology in society. So adoption is important because even the rules are there because we assume that technology will be very important for our societies, for our economies. Some of the numbers from the commission are not very encouraging. One particular number cites AI adoption, of course, with the caveat that this adoption, is measured in different ways, and I don't know exactly how they measured it. But it cites it at under 10%, whereas the target for 2030 should be at 75%. So that delta of 65%, I think, should be a very big priority for the next political mandate. But that's not as easy as saying, okay, now everybody should use AI, right? It needs to be supported. It needs to be that adoption needs to be supported, and it's got a lot of moving parts where we need to be paying attention. So from geopolitical parts where I was saying, making sure that we use our comparative advantage in the international arena, to then focusing on the more technical part, making sure that we secure the resilience of our supply chains, right, for chips, for semiconductors, and so on. Then working to fund research and development. Then working to increase connectivity, working for making data flows a little bit easier, making sure that when we do investments in what is now a priority for the European Union in defense, we think about it in a smart way by stimulating the development of emerging technologies, and that way also serving, in a sense, the commercial use of those new technologies. So there's a lot of things to do. I'll close because I'm watching my time. I see I have just a few more minutes. I'll close with a few thoughts on the Paris summit, and then longer term thinking. But I hope that in this part, I was able to convey some of the more not necessarily visible or not upfront reasons for why the AI Act exists and how it works. I think that now a very important space to watch is the Paris AI Action Summit that's coming up in February, because that is the third instantiation of the summit that was started in the UK at the Bletchley Park. And it is for the first time that it's coming to the EU, where the EU now has the regulation in place, has the AI office in place. France is very enthusiastic about AI. So a lot of maybe not radical changes of direction, but a lot of good initiatives might come out of the Paris summit. So I would watch that in the months to come. And then maybe for the last minute, I'll close a little bit with an article by a young professor published a couple of years ago in Foreign Affairs. And that kind of stuck with me. Not necessarily that I know that professors work, but I think his thesis was beautifully simple and elegant, and it kind of gives weight to many of the things that we do when we think about technology. He said the following. He said, look, a mammal species lives on average, by just looking at the past mammal species, for 1 million years or more. And that's on average, right? We humans probably have some other advantages to the woolly mammoths, for example. Um, so probably we're going to live, as a species for 1 million or more years. And then that makes us the ones who are, here in this room, and me and others, and all of the 8 billion people or however many on this planet, that makes us really the very, very ancients, the very, very first humans, in a sense. We're the first ones, if you think about all the gazillions of people that are coming after us. And if you think about, democracy, for example, that's been around for, okay, let's say, Athens and so on, 2000 years, but really we've been experimenting with democracy for the past few hundred years, right? It's not a given. It's not something that we know it's going to last forever in that time scale. So it really is worth thinking about our decisions and the rules that we set out in that mindset, looking at the gazillions of people that are coming after us and saying, okay, what is the world in which we want them to live? And to me personally, it's that kind of world where you have democracy, where you have the rule of law, where you have your individual freedoms and your ability to be free. These I think are very, very important. And I think those are some of the values that have been etched a little bit into the development of technology with the AI Act.
Hello? Okay, now you can hear me. No, I also have an issue with my voice. I've talked too much, so I can't really scream. But thank you very much, Dan, and for the note that you finished also this talk. We've been actually talking a lot here about like we about the word responsibility and our responsibility now for the future generations and what we basically want to what kind of like values do we want to raise our children. We actually even called AI a child. That's a conversation we shouldn't be having right now. But anyway, thank you very much for joining. Thank you for being with us and sharing your thoughts and experiences so far. Please, everybody, a round of applause for Dan.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you.